Joining me now from Montreal is the Premier of Nova Scotia, Stephen McNeil. Premier McNeil, thank you very much for taking the time. I want to start by asking you what you think was achieved at this meeting today.
Well, listen, this was a positive meeting in terms of ensuring that we continue to take down the barriers around trade inside of Canada. I was very optimistic to hear the Prime Minister and Minister LeBlanc's commitment to help provinces continue to make sure that we improve regulatory reform inside of Canada. There was lots of positive conversations about how do we maximize the value of our resources. The issue of discounted oil is an important issue for Canada. It's just not an issue for Alberta. It's one for the entire Canadian economy, and the ideas around how we were able to look at what we could do to support Alberta and the economy.
Okay, I know the issue of interprovincial trade was a really, really big one for you. Can you point to any concrete steps forward? Was there concrete progress, or was it more just in terms of principles and agreeing to move forward on this?
No, there's a number of inside of provincial jurisdictions. For example, occupational health and safety issues are unified across the country now. We were able to put in place where we ensured things like eye protection, first aid kits would be consistent from one end of this country to the other. That'll take place in the early part of 2019. We double wide tires will be allowed on highways across this country at the end of 2019. We've seen movement on business registry, how to continue to improve those. But what was really important today was that the national government recognized they have a role to play in helping us continue, particularly around the environmental and regulatory environment, providing some consistency. So when we look at major projects that go across provincial boundaries, that capital knows and industry knows what the rules are, and they're consistent across the country.
Okay, well, you mentioned environmental legislation or environmental regulation. I want to ask you something which is one of the big questions which people are still asking as this day comes to an end. We have descriptions. You were in the room. We have descriptions that Prime Minister Trudeau is said to have told Ontario Premier Doug Ford that the federal government was expecting Ontario to do more than 30% reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, that he wanted Ontario, and it's now expected that Ontario should do more. You were in the room. What was said? Can you help clarify it?
That was not my interpretation at all of what the Prime Minister said. The Prime Minister has been very clear about putting a price on carbon. There are really two ways to do that: as a cap and trade system as well as or a carbon tax. Some provinces have chosen the cap and trade system. The Prime Minister had said that by having reduced by 2030, everyone will be 30%, and some will actually be higher. Like Nova Scotia, for example, we're currently 30% below where we were in 2005 today, but we're continuing to implement changes to ensure that we continue to reduce our carbon footprint. So by 2030, we will be 50% below where we were in 2005. But the Prime Minister in no way moved that goalpost. He's been consistent. Whether you agree or not with the approach of the federal government is one thing, but the reality is the Prime Minister has been very consistent on this issue, and we're looking forward to continuing to move forward to help improve the climate of Canada, but at the same time building the economy.
So just to be clear, you were in the room, and when Ontario officials tell us that the Prime Minister, quote unquote, moved the goalposts, and when Doug Ford, Premier Doug Ford, your colleague, another Premier, says that he thinks Ottawa is changing the rules and asking more than was asked under the Paris Agreement, you say that's not an accurate interpretation.
The description the Prime Minister said today is exactly what he's been saying since we originally met in Vancouver. The rules have not changed, the goalpost did not move, but we will have provinces achieving greater reductions simply based on where we've all started and the impact and how we choose to make those changes. But by no way did the Prime Minister change his position. He's been very clear. There needs to be a price on carbon. There are really two ways to do that: a cap and trade system or a carbon tax, and we'll continue to green up the economy of this country.
You've described how you say that Nova Scotia will be able to meet its obligations under both the Paris Accord and to the federal government and under the carbon pricing scheme. How serious, though, do you think the situation in the country is now with this profound disagreement about how to go about reducing greenhouse gas emissions?
Well, listen, we've continued over the last 2 years to work extremely hard to find a solution that fit Nova Scotia, that recognized the work that Nova Scotians have been doing, I will say, really for more than a decade, through successive political parties. It started under Conservative, through a New Democratic Party, and now under our government, where we continue to reduce our GHG production. Other provinces are finding a different path forward, but the Prime Minister had said, and the federal government had said, that if provinces were not willing to find their own solution by putting a price on carbon, that the backstop would be implemented, and that's what they're doing. And it's my view that the national government has the authority to put a pan-Canadian price on carbon, and we took this challenge very seriously back a few years ago to make sure that we met the parameters in and around putting that price on carbon.
Okay, Premier McNeil, thank you very much for speaking with us. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you very much.